Amara was just an ordinary girl, enjoying a beautiful afternoon in the park. She loved the way the sun kissed her skin, and the cool breeze rustled through the leaves of the tall trees around her. It was a quiet day, and everything felt peaceful. She had her dog, Max, with her. They often came here together. Max, a golden retriever, was her best friend. He loved running around the park, playing fetch, and simply enjoying the open space. Amara would often sit on the grass, tossing a ball for him, and then watch as he happily chased it. The park was usually full of people, but today, it was quieter than usual. Amara didn't mind, though. She enjoyed the calmness. She had brought a book along, but Max's playful antics had taken her attention away. She looked around, taking in the scenery. There were a few people scattered here and there, some sitting on benches, others walking dogs, and a couple of joggers passing by. But Amara's peaceful afternoon was about to take a sudden turn. As she threw the ball one more time for Max, a figure approached from the edge of the park. Amara didn't notice him at first, but Max, who was always alert, immediately stopped and began barking. It wasn't the usual bark of excitement, but more of a warning. Amara turned to look and saw a man in a police uniform walking toward her. His stern face didn't soften when he reached her. "Hey, you there," he called, his voice firm. Amara frowned. She didn't know this officer, and she couldn't understand why he was approaching her. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, standing up from the grass, a little confused. The officer, who was tall and imposing, looked down at her with a mixture of suspicion and disdain. "You're not supposed to be here," he said sharply. "You're loitering." Amara was taken aback. "Loitering? I'm just playing with my dog," she replied, pointing to Max, who was now sitting quietly by her side, wagging his tail. "I'm not bothering anyone." Amara and her mother, Mayor Maya Davis, walked out of the holding room together, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the police station. The tension in the air was thick, but the mayor's presence seemed to calm the situation, at least for now. Still, Amara could feel a knot in her stomach. Everything felt surreal. It was like she was in a bad dream that she couldn't wake up from. Just a few hours ago, she had been at the park, enjoying a normal day, and now her life had been turned upside down. The days after the rally passed slowly for Amara. The constant media attention, the public discussions about the investigation, and the growing support from the community had created a sense of urgency in the air. It was a whirlwind of emotions and responsibilities. Amara found herself thinking more and more about the future, about the world she was now a part of. She had always been a quiet observer, content to stay in the background. But now, with the entire city the entire country watching her, she felt a sense of duty she never imagined she'd have to carry. Her mother, Mayor Maya Davis, had been working tirelessly on the investigation, demanding that the police department hold Officer Derek accountable for his actions. The news surrounding the case had sparked protests, conversations, and debates across the city. Some people, mostly those who had always seen her mother as a symbol of justice, rallied behind her. Others, those who resisted change or feared losing power, pushed back. Amara's family had become the face of a larger conversation about racial inequality in their city. It wasn't just her mother who was under scrutiny, it was everyone who had stood by her and her policies for years. But no one was backing down. Not Amara, not her mother, and not the people who had come to see this as a fight worth joining. One afternoon, a week after the rally, the mayor's office received a report. The investigation into Officer Derek's conduct was officially completed, and the results were going to be announced. Amara could feel the tension in the air as her mother read through the document. It was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment when the truth would finally be revealed. "Mom?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother, sitting at her desk, looked up from the report, her face unreadable. Yes, sweetheart. Is it what we hoped for? Amara's heart was pounding in her chest. She wanted to know, but at the same time, she was terrified of the answer. What if it wasn't enough? What if the system, the very system her mother had fought so hard to change, failed them now? Mayor Davis closed the report slowly, her expression softening as she looked at her daughter. It's a step in the right direction, she said, her voice steady. But it's not the end of the road. Amara felt a small sense of relief, but the weight of her mother's words still lingered. What does that mean? She asked. It means that the officer, Derek, has been officially dismissed from the force. His actions were deemed unlawful and discriminatory. However, this isn't just about one officer. It's about changing how things work, how the system works. Amara didn't know how to process this. On one hand, it was a victory. Derek, the officer who had treated her so unjustly, had been removed from his position. But her mother was right. This wasn't just about him. It was about a much larger issue, one that couldn't be solved with just one firing or one investigation. Mom, do you think this is enough? Just getting rid of one officer? Amara asked. Her mother sighed, rubbing her temples. No. This is just one piece of the puzzle. It's a small victory, but it's not enough. We need a full reform of the police department, we need new training programs, and we need better accountability. It's a long road ahead, and there are still people who are going to fight us every step of the way. Amara nodded. It was a lot to take in, but she understood. This wasn't a simple solution. This wasn't something that could be fixed in a few days or even a few months. This was going to take time. And it would take all of them, her mother, the community, and everyone who had been affected by this kind of injustice, working together to create lasting change. Over the next few weeks, Mayor Davis held a series of town hall meetings to discuss the findings of the investigation and the steps forward. The room was often filled to capacity, with people from all walks of life coming together to talk about the future. Some were hopeful, believing that change was possible. Others were more skeptical, unsure if the system could ever truly be reformed. But the mayor stood firm, answering questions, offering solutions, and challenging everyone in the room to stand up for what was right. Through it all, Amara stayed by her mother's side. She helped organize the events, spoke at some of the meetings, and even answered questions from the press. It was exhausting, but it felt important. She wasn't just the mayor's daughter anymore. She was a part of something bigger, something that mattered. She could feel the weight of the responsibility, but she didn't shy away from it. She was ready to fight for the change she knew was possible. One day, as they were leaving a town hall, Amara turned to her mother. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said quietly. "I don't know how you do it." Mayor Davis smiled, the exhaustion still in her eyes, but there was a spark of determination there too. "You're part of this, Amara," she said. "You've shown me what true strength is. You've made me proud, too." The words meant more than Amara could express. She had always admired her mother, but now, as they stood together, fighting for justice, she understood what it truly meant to stand up for what was right. They had been through so much, and they still had a long way to go. But one thing was certain, they weren't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. Months passed, and the conversation about police reform continued. New policies were proposed, some were accepted, and others faced fierce opposition. But with each step, Amara felt a sense of hope growing. The fight wasn't over, but they had taken the first step toward real change. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Amara sat with her mother in their living room. The house was quiet, and for the first time in a while, they were able to relax. "Do you think we're making a difference?" Amara asked, looking at her mother. Mayor Davis smiled softly, resting her hand on Amara's. "We are, sweetheart. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it's happening. And we're part of it?" Amara nodded, feeling the weight of those words. They had fought for what was right, and even though the battle wasn't over, they had made a mark. They had started a conversation that was too important to ignore. And as they sat together, Amara realized that no matter what the future held, she would always be ready to fight for justice. With her mother by her side, she knew they could face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they were unstoppable. The next few days felt like a blur to Amara. After the incident at the park, her life had been turned upside down. The phone calls, the meetings, the endless stream of reporters, everything seemed to happen all at once. She barely had time to process what had happened before the world began to turn its attention to her and her mother. The mayor's office was flooded with calls, some supportive, some questioning. It wasn't long before news outlets picked up the story, and soon, Amara's name was everywhere. The headlines weren't kind. Some tried to paint her as just another statistic, another young person caught in the crossfire of a flawed system. But her mother, Mayor Maya Davis, was determined to make sure that the truth was heard. She wasn't about to let her daughter's name be dragged through the mud. Amara sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone, scrolling through social media. The comments were mixed. Some people were angry, calling the police officers' actions unforgivable. Others were skeptical, wondering if the situation had been blown out of proportion. But it was the messages from people who had been through similar experiences that stuck with her the most. They shared their own stories of police misconduct, of being treated unfairly because of their race. It made Amara realize just how much this was about more than just one officer. This was part of a larger, deeply rooted issue that needed to be addressed. Her mother had become the face of the fight for justice, and that brought both strength and pressure. Mayor Davis had always been an advocate for racial equality, but now, with Amara at the center of the storm, it felt personal in a way it hadn't before. The mayor's schedule had become packed with meetings, press conferences, and public appearances. Amara was proud of her mother, but she couldn't help feeling overwhelmed by the constant media attention. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Amara noticed the weariness in her mother's eyes. Despite her strong exterior, the weight of the situation was starting to show. The mayor had always been the one to keep things together, to fight for others, but now she was fighting for her family. Amara could see the toll it was taking on her. "You okay, Mom?" Amara asked, her voice soft. She hadn't said much to her mother since the incident, but she knew her mom was doing everything she could. Still, it couldn't be easy. Mayor Davis smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a lot to handle right now." Amara could see that her mother was lying, but she didn't press. She knew her mother well enough to understand that she was trying to protect her from the weight of it all. The next morning, they were in the middle of breakfast when the phone rang. Mayor Davis answered it quickly, her voice steady but serious as she listened to the person on the other end. Amara could feel the tension in the air as her mother's face grew more serious. The call ended, and the mayor placed the phone down on the table. "It's starting," she said quietly. "Starting?" Amara asked, feeling a knot form in her stomach. "The investigation. The police department has officially opened a review of the incident. It's going to be big. And I don't expect them to go easy on the officer involved." Amara nodded, trying to take in what her mother was saying. It was a step in the right direction, but it also meant more attention, more scrutiny, more people involved. It was clear that the battle was far from over. As the days passed, the pressure only increased. The police officer, Derek, who had arrested Amara, had been placed on administrative leave, but that didn't bring her much comfort. She knew the wheels of justice moved slowly, and she was anxious to see what would come of the investigation. Her mother, despite her busy schedule, made sure to sit down with Amara every evening. They talked about everything and nothing, and those moments of quiet were the only times Amara felt some semblance of peace. One evening, as they were sitting in the living room, Amara asked, "Mom, do you think anything is going to change? I mean, what happens if this doesn't go the way we hope?" Mayor Davis looked at her daughter, her expression softening. "Change is never easy, Amara. It never happens overnight. But it's happening. It might take time, but we're making a difference. And you're part of that. Don't forget that." Amara didn't say anything. She wanted to believe her mother, but she was scared. She was scared of what might happen if the investigation didn't go the way they hoped. Scared of what it would mean for her and for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. But her mother was right about one thing: they were making a difference. It wasn't just the investigation that had people talking. It was the way the community had rallied behind them. People were standing up, speaking out, and sharing their own stories. The injustice Amara had faced was far from unique. It was part of a pattern, and more people were starting to see that. At a rally a few days later, Mayor Davis spoke passionately about the need for accountability and reform. She talked about the importance of listening to the voices of those who had been silenced for too long. Amara stood by her mother's side, watching as the crowd cheered. "I know this is hard," the mayor said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "But we can't be silent anymore. We can't let fear control us. We have to stand up, speak out, and demand change." Amara felt a surge of pride as she listened to her mother. This was why she had always admired her, because she didn't back down in the face of adversity. She fought for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. But as the rally ended and they made their way back to the car, Amara couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. She knew her mother was right. This fight was bigger than just one officer. It was about changing a system that had been broken for so long. But was that really possible? Later that evening, as they sat in the quiet of their living room, Amara turned to her mother. "Do you ever get scared?" she asked quietly. Her mother didn't answer right away, but after a moment, she nodded. "Yes. Sometimes I'm scared. But fear can't stop us. We have to keep going. For you, for everyone." Amara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her mother's words. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear: they were in this together. And no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, they weren't going to stop fighting for what was right. Her mother, despite her anger, kept a steady pace, her eyes focused ahead. Amara could see that the mayor was trying to keep her composure, but the exhaustion was starting to show in the lines of her face. She had always been a symbol of strength for the community, someone who fought for justice and equality, but seeing her daughter in this position had shaken her in a way that Amara couldn't fully understand. "Mom, what's going to happen now?" Amara asked softly, breaking the silence between them. The mayor didn't look at her immediately, but after a few moments, she sighed and turned to face her daughter. "We're going to make sure this never happens again," she said with determination. "But I won't lie to you, sweetheart. This is bigger than just you and me. It's bigger than just one officer." Amara felt a chill run down her spine as she listened to her mother's words. She knew her mom was a fighter, but the way she spoke now made it clear that things were about to get complicated. Amara had never fully realized the power of her mother's position as mayor, but now she was starting to understand. Mayor Davis had the ability to change things, but that came with a lot of responsibility and danger. "What do you mean, Mom?" Amara asked, her voice filled with confusion. The mayor paused for a moment before responding. "This isn't just about one officer making a mistake. It's about a system that allows people to act without thinking, to treat others unfairly because of their race. We need to change that system, Amara." Amara didn't fully understand what her mother meant. How could something as simple as playing in the park lead to all this? Why had the officer treated her that way? She had done nothing wrong. But as her mother spoke, Amara began to see a larger picture. She wasn't just a victim of one officer's bad judgment, she was part of a much bigger conversation about racial inequality, power, and justice. As they left the station and stepped into the bright sunlight outside, Amara could see reporters standing in front of the building, cameras flashing as they captured every moment. The story had already started to spread, and Amara knew it wouldn't be long before it was all over the news. Her mother's position as mayor made her family a target in the eyes of some, and this incident would only add fuel to the fire. "Mom, they're going to talk about us, aren't they?" Amara said, her voice filled with worry. "The press is going to make it worse." The mayor looked down at her daughter with a reassuring smile. "We're going to take control of this story, Amara. The truth is on our side. They can't twist that." Amara wasn't so sure. It felt like everything was spiraling out of control, and no matter how much her mother tried to reassure her, Amara couldn't shake the fear that things were only going to get worse. She had already seen how quickly the officer had reacted to her simply being in the park. What would happen now that the press was involved? What would happen when people started pointing fingers, blaming her mother for what had happened? As they approached the car, the mayor took a deep breath and turned to her daughter. "We're going to go straight to the office, Amara. I need to make some calls, and I need to speak to the police chief. But you're going to be okay. I promise you." Amara nodded, trying to find comfort in her mother's words, but her mind was still racing. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something huge, something she couldn't control. Everything she had ever known about the world seemed to be shifting. The safe, quiet life she had lived in the small community she called home now felt fragile, uncertain. As they drove toward City Hall, the mayor's phone rang. She answered it almost immediately, her voice calm but firm. Amara couldn't hear the conversation, but she could tell from the way her mother's shoulders stiffened that something important was being discussed. "We need to take action," the mayor said as she hung up the phone. "The chief of police is going to launch an internal investigation, but that's not enough. We need to make sure this officer is held accountable for his actions." Amara didn't know much about politics, but she knew her mother had a reputation for standing up for what was right. She had seen her give powerful speeches at rallies and public events, always calling for change and justice. Now, it was clear that the fight was personal. This was no longer just about the mayor's role in the community, it was about protecting her family and standing up for her daughter. The car pulled up to City Hall, and they quickly made their way inside. As soon as they entered the mayor's office, Amara could see the weight of the situation pressing down on her mother. She immediately sat behind her desk, pulled out a stack of papers, and began making notes. The room was filled with the sounds of phones ringing, people talking outside, and the quiet rustle of papers being shuffled. But despite the noise, Amara felt like everything was still. "Mom, what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The mayor looked up, her expression softening for just a moment. "Now, we fight, Amara. We fight for you. And we fight for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly, just because of who they are." Amara sat down across from her mother, her heart still heavy with worry. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure, her mother wasn't going to let this go. And neither was she. They were going to face this together, no matter what. The mayor's phone rang again, and this time, the conversation was short. She turned to Amara and smiled. "We've got a long road ahead, but I'm not going to stop until we get justice. I'm not going to stop until things change." Amara looked at her mother, feeling a surge of pride. No matter how uncertain the future seemed, she knew her mother would fight for what was right. And that made all the difference in the world. The officer didn't seem to care about her explanation. Instead, his eyes narrowed, and he took another step closer. "You're making a scene. You need to leave." He didn't wait for her to respond before grabbing her arm, pulling her toward the side. As Amara sat in the cold, dimly lit room, waiting for some sort of explanation, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was wrong. She had always been the kind of person to keep to herself, never causing trouble. In fact, most of her friends would describe her as shy and quiet, someone who preferred reading her favorite books or walking her dog at the park. So why had she ended up here? What had she done to deserve this? Amara's mind wandered back to the earlier moments of the day, trying to piece everything together. She had simply been enjoying the peaceful afternoon, playing with Max, when everything changed. She had never imagined that something as simple as spending time in the park would turn into a nightmare. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door opening. Amara looked up, expecting another officer to come and ask her more questions or, perhaps, give her some explanation. But instead, the person who walked in took her completely by surprise. It was her mother. Mayor Maya Davis walked into the holding room, her expression a mixture of concern and anger. The moment Amara saw her, she felt a rush of relief. At least someone who cared about her was here. But her mother's presence also made her realize the seriousness of the situation. The mayor was known for her calm demeanor and unwavering dedication to justice, and she had always been a voice for the community, especially in matters of racial equality. But now, here she was, in a police station, searching for her own daughter. "Amara," Mayor Davis said, rushing to her daughter's side. "Are you okay?" Amara stood up, her voice trembling. "Mom, I don't understand. What happened? Why am I here? I didn't do anything wrong." The mayor gently placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, trying to reassure her. "It's going to be okay. We'll get you out of here." Amara could see the frustration and sadness in her mother's eyes. She had always been a strong, composed woman, but seeing her daughter in this situation seemed to shake her. It was clear that Mayor Davis was doing everything she could to stay calm. "I don't know what happened," Amara continued, her voice cracking. "I was just at the park with Max, and then this officer came over. He said I was loitering, but I wasn't doing anything. I was just playing with my dog. Then he arrested me. He didn't even listen to me when I tried to explain." Mayor Davis took a deep breath. "I know, sweetheart. I know." Amara couldn't believe this was happening. How could this be happening to her? She had always been so careful, so respectful of the rules. And now she was sitting here, in a holding cell, being treated like a criminal. It didn't make sense. But then, as she looked at her mother, Amara realized something. She wasn't just any girl. She was the mayor's daughter. People in the community looked up to her mother, admired her for everything she stood for. And yet, here they were, stuck in this nightmare. "What's going to happen now, Mom?" Amara asked, her voice small. "Am I going to get out of here? What about the press? Are they going to know about this?" Mayor Davis squeezed her daughter's hand. "We'll take care of everything. Don't worry about the press right now. We need to focus on getting you home first. The officers here have no idea who you are. They have no idea who they're messing with." Amara's mind raced as she tried to process what her mother was saying. Of course, her mother had the power to make this all go away. She was the mayor. But what if it wasn't that simple? What if this situation was bigger than just her? What if it was about something more? As if reading her thoughts, Mayor Davis spoke again. "I'm going to make sure we get to the bottom of this. No one, not even an officer, has the right to treat anyone like this, especially you." Just as her mother spoke those words, the door to the holding room opened again. This time, a different officer walked in. He was taller, with a more neutral expression than the one who had arrested Amara. "Mayor Davis," the officer said, nodding his head in respect. "We're looking into the situation. I apologize for the inconvenience, but we're just following protocol." Mayor Davis stood up, her stance firm. "Protocol? Is that what you call this? My daughter has been locked up like a criminal without cause. And now you're telling me it's just protocol." The officer shifted uncomfortably. "I understand your frustration, but we have procedures in place. I'll have a report on your daughter's case ready in a few hours." "I don't care about your procedures," Mayor Davis said, her voice rising. "I care about why my daughter was treated this way in the first place. This isn't just about a mistake. It's about the systemic issues that exist in this department." The officer didn't say anything in response, but his face became more serious. He clearly wasn't prepared for the mayor's fury. Amara could see the tension in the room growing. Her mother was a woman of principle, and she wasn't about to back down. "Can we just get her out of here now?" Amara asked, feeling helpless. She didn't want to see her mother get upset, but she also just wanted to go home. The officer nodded, his tone softer now. "We'll take care of it. I'll make sure she's released as soon as possible. We'll also review the officer's actions." But Amara wasn't sure if that would be enough. She felt the weight of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just about one officer's mistake. This was about something much bigger. She could feel it in her bones. As her mother and the officer exchanged a few more words, Amara couldn't help but wonder what the future held. This incident was just the beginning of something much larger than she could imagine. When the officer finally left the room, Mayor Davis turned to her daughter with a determined look on her face. "This isn't over, Amara," she said. "I'm going to make sure this officer and his department are held accountable for what they've done." Amara nodded, feeling both comforted and terrified by her mother's words. She knew her mother would fight for her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the start of something bigger. Something that would affect not just her, but everyone who had ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. As they walked out of the holding room, Amara knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The world had just become a lot more complicated. But with her mother by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. "Excuse me," Amara said, now feeling uncomfortable. "I haven't done anything wrong. Please, let go of me." But the officer only tightened his grip. "Stop resisting," he commanded, his voice cold and harsh. "You're under arrest." Amara's heart started to race. Arrest? For what? She had no idea what was happening. She looked around for help, but most people had either ignored the scene or quickly turned away. She was alone, and the officer's grip on her arm didn't loosen. "Please, let me go," she said, panic rising in her chest. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer wasn't listening. He was already pulling out his handcuffs and snapping them onto her wrists. "You're coming with me," he said, ignoring her protests. "Stop. Please." Amara cried, her voice shaking. "I need to call my mom. This is a mistake." But the officer simply shoved her toward his patrol car, not sparing her a second glance. "You'll have your chance to explain at the station," he muttered. Amara was led to the back of the police car and shoved inside, the door slamming behind her with a loud clang. She could feel the cold metal of the cage surrounding her, her wrists aching from the tight cuffs. Max was left behind, still sitting at the park, watching her as the car pulled away. Inside the car, Amara sat in stunned silence. She couldn't believe this was happening. She had been to the park countless times before, always alone or with her mother, and never once had she been bothered. Now, here she was, locked in the back of a police car for no apparent reason. Her mind raced. Was it because she was black? Did the officer see her and decide she didn't belong in the park? Was this just another case of racial profiling? The officer didn't speak to her during the ride, which felt like an eternity. Amara was left alone with her thoughts, unable to make sense of what had just happened. She couldn't help but think about her mother, Mayor Maya Davis. If only her mom were here to fix everything. But Amara knew she wasn't going to call her mother yet. Not until she understood why this was happening. The police car eventually arrived at the station, and Amara was unceremoniously dragged from the back seat. The officer shoved her inside the building without a word, and she was placed in a holding area. The coldness of the concrete floor against her feet made her shiver, but she couldn't focus on anything except the confusion swirling inside her mind. A couple of officers passed by, giving her little more than a glance, as if she were just another detainee. They didn't seem to care about the fact that she was clearly scared, confused, and upset. No one seemed interested in explaining why she was there or what was going to happen next. Hours seemed to stretch into an endless void, with Amara sitting in the cold, dimly lit room, hoping someone would show up and explain why she was being treated this way. She had never been in trouble before. All she wanted was to go home, but the more she thought about it, the more it seemed like she had become a target for something she couldn't control. Finally, after what felt like forever, the officer who had arrested her came into the room. He was holding some paperwork in his hands, and his expression was less hostile now but still tense. "You're being held for loitering," he said, as though it was the most normal thing in the world. "You'll have your hearing tomorrow." Amara didn't know how to respond. "Loitering?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't do anything. I was just playing with my dog. Why am I in here?" The officer didn't answer her question. Instead, he turned on his heel and left, the door slamming shut behind him. Amara sat back against the cold wall, tears welling up in her eyes. She couldn't understand why this was happening. She was just a teenager, trying to have a normal day. But now, she was locked in a cage like a criminal, with no idea when she'd be let out. The only thing that kept running through her mind was the fact that this was not just about her. Something deeper was at play here. But what? Why her? Why now? And little did she know, her life was about to change forever.